Hey friends, my name is Jim. Thanks for joining me for this edition of Parent Lab. We believe the best parents are those who are always learning, and we want to partner with you to help you become the best parent you can be. This series is entitled 5 Essential Conversations for Raising Successful Kids. After raising 3 sons and reading dozens of books on parenting, it dawned on me that being a good parent is more about having the right ongoing conversations than simply mastering the right parenting content. And here's the surprising thing. I'm not talking about the conversations you have with your kids, but the conversations you have with each other as you parent and raise your kids together. And if you are a single parent, the ones you have with trusted confidants about how you are raising your kids. What kinds of conversations would these be, you ask? Surprisingly, they aren't about specific topics, but emotional processes. Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe our friends from the aviation world can help. When facing conditions of low to no visibility, pilots can become confused, disoriented, and ultimately lose control of their aircraft with tragic consequences. That's why wise pilots go on to learn how to fly a plane by instruments only. There are a handful of gauges pilots must monitor if they want to successfully take off, fly, and land a plane in challenging conditions. These gauges indicate the altitude, heading, attitude, vertical speed, turn coordination, and airspeed of a plane as it moves through blinding fog and clouds. Parenting can be a similar experience. Life comes at us one day at a time, and it's difficult to see what the future holds beyond any given day. With social media's ever-present influence and the rapid rate of cultural change, it is easy for us as parents to become confused, disoriented, and feeling like we are headed for disaster. That's why we need to keep our eyes on 5 crucial parenting gauges. These indicators, if minded well, will help us give our kids the best chance to take off and land successfully as young adults in this modern world. I've constructed a dashboard that I believe will give you a lot of help as you help your kids navigate through the fog and turbulence of these crazy times. Here's a brief introduction to the 5 gauges that will serve as the subjects of the 5 essential conversations that will help you raise successful kids. The first gauge is the training gauge. It measures our progress from protection to preparation. Clearly, we bring our kids home from the hospital in a vulnerable state. Almost all our time and energy goes to providing for their needs and protecting them until they can begin to be responsible and care for themselves. Increasingly, as they develop their cognitive and emotional abilities, we can switch our efforts to preparing them to think for themselves, to make their own wise choices, and take responsibility for their own well-being. Trust me, you'll want to monitor this gauge well, because if you don't, your kids will be living in your basement well into their 30s. The second gauge is the heading gauge. The heading gauge indicates the direction your children are in fact going, moment by moment and over the course of time. Bottom line, we want our children to be headed in directions that are positive, productive, and life-giving. This gauge identifies the 2 means by which we can direct their paths: control and influence. And when they're toddlers, we can exert significant control over them. We can literally pick them up and put them wherever we think best. But as they begin to develop a mind of their own and begin to live much of their lives apart from us at school and with their friends, we increasingly lose control over them. Our only means then to guide them is through the relational influence we have earned with them. Here's the third gauge. I call it the connection gauge. The connection gauge identifies 2 key aspects of healthy relational connections: closeness and distance, and how balancing them will determine the quality of our relationship with our kids. If influence is the key to our ongoing ability to guide our children as they grow into adulthood, then the quality of our relationship with them is crucial. If we get too close or stay too distant from our kids emotionally, we will harm the connection we have with them and thus diminish our influence. And here's the 4th gauge. I call it the mindset gauge. The mindset gauge refers to the mental and emotional lens through which your kids see themselves in relation to their world. The mindset gauge, inspired by Carol Dweck's book Mindset, indicates whether your child tends toward a fixed or growth mindset. As parents, we will be the primary shapers of the way our kids see themselves and the reality around them, which will in turn determine whether they see adversity and failure as a blessing or a curse. The fifth gauge is the expectation gauge. The expectation gauge helps us track the nature of the expectations we place on our kids. The expectations we place on our kids can take two forms. We can hold up expectations for their achievements or for the development of their character. High expectations for their achievements may get them further faster, but it increases the likelihood that they will emotionally crash. High expectations for the development of their character will ensure that whatever they accomplish will last. Monitoring this gauge well will protect your kids from the unprecedented levels of anxiety and depression that we are seeing today and set them up for lifelong success. Now, obviously, these aren't literal gauges that we can wire to the backs of our kids' heads and get a reading on every time that they walk by. They represent the 5 crucial, ongoing conversations parents need to have as their kids are growing up around them. With that in mind, here are some key thoughts about this series. First, parenting, like flying, is about minding the gauges. Circumstances and kids are always changing. That's why you've got to mind the gauges along the way. Your conversations will need to adjust as your kids and the conditions they are facing change. The second thought is this: trust the indicators, not your emotions or feelings. Without instruments, flying through the clouds can lead to a pilot's spatial disorientation, which can lead to disaster. When we see our kids growing up, facing new challenges, experiencing some pain and failure, it can lead to emotional disorientation on our parts, which can cause us to react in ways that may make us feel better in the present, but lead to disaster for our kids in the future. Trust the indicators, not your emotions. Third, each child is different and requires a custom mix. Flights are rarely the same. The plane, crew, conditions are always changing. The same will be true of your kids. Each one will require their own special mix. This explains why parenting is more art than science, and that's why I hope you'll allow me to guide you through this series as we explore the 5 essential conversations that will help you give your kids the best chance to take off and land successfully in this modern world. First up, the training gauge, moving from protection to preparation. If you want to make sure not to miss any of the episodes, click subscribe below. And I look forward to having you join me on this journey to discover these 5 essential conversations.